In this video, we are going to see about the standard deviation in statistics. Standard deviation measures the spread of a data distribution. Specifically, it shows you how much your data is spread out around the mean or average. For example, are all your scores close to the average? Or are lots of scores way above or way below the average score? A high standard deviation means that values are generally far from the mean, while a low standard deviation indicates that values are clustered close to the mean. The more spread out a data distribution is, the greater its standard deviation. Using the standard deviation, statisticians may determine if the data has a normal curve or other mathematical relationship. The formula for standard deviation. The square root of x minus mu whole square is divided by n minus 1, where xi equals value of ith point in the dataset. X bar equals the mean value of the dataset. N equals number of data points in the dataset. Calculating the standard deviation. Standard deviation is calculated as follows. Step 1. The mean value is calculated by adding all the data points and dividing by the number of data points. Step 2. The variance for each data point is calculated by subtracting the mean from the value of the data point. Each of those resulting values is then squared and the result summed. The result is then divided by the number of data points less 1. Step 3. The square root of the variance, result from step 2, is then used to find the standard deviation. Condition to apply standard deviation. Standard deviation is a tool which can only be used for normal distributed data. If the data is not normally distributed, then you can't apply standard deviation formula. If the data behaves in a normal curve, then 68% of the data points will fall within one standard deviation of the average or mean data point. Application of standard deviation. Standard deviation is an especially useful tool in investing and trading strategies as it helps measure market and security volatility and predict performance trends. As it relates to investing, for example, an index fund is likely to have a low standard deviation versus its benchmark index, as the fund's goal is to replicate the index. On the other hand, one can expect aggressive growth funds to have a high standard deviation from relative stock indices, as their portfolio managers make aggressive bets to generate higher than average returns. Standard deviation is one of the key fundamental risk measures that analysts, portfolio managers, advisors use. Investment firms report the standard deviation of their mutual funds and other products. A large dispersion shows how much the return on the fund is deviating from the expected normal returns. Standard deviation is a statistical measurement in finance that, when applied to the annual rate of return of an investment, sheds light on that investment's historical volatility. The greater the standard deviation of securities, the greater the variance between each price and the mean, which shows a larger price range. For example, a volatile stock has a high standard deviation, while the deviation of a stable blue-chip stock is usually rather low. The empirical rule. The standard deviation and the mean together can tell you where most of the values in your distribution lie, if they follow a normal distribution. The empirical rule, or the 68-95-99.7 rule, tells you where your values lie. 1. Around 68% of scores are within 2 standard deviations of the mean. 2. Around 95% of scores are within 4 standard deviations of the mean. 3. around 99.7% of scores are within 6 standard deviations of the mean. The empirical rule is a quick way to get an overview of your data and check for any outliers or extreme values that don't follow this pattern. For non-normal distributions, the standard deviation is a less reliable measure of variability and should be used in combination with other measures like the range or interquartile range. Drawback of standard deviation. The biggest drawback of using standard deviation is that it can be impacted by outliers and extreme values. For non-normal distributions, the standard deviation is a less reliable measure of variability and should be used in combination with other measures like the range or interquartile range. Example 1. You administer a memory recall test to a group of students. The data follows a normal distribution with a mean score of 50 and a standard deviation of 10. Example 2. For example, the blue distribution on bottom has a greater standard deviation than the green distribution on top. Example 3. Which of the data distribution, shown below, has the greater standard deviation? Example 4. There are 39 plants in the garden. A few plants were selected randomly, and their heights in centimeter were recorded as follows: 51, 38, 79, 46, 57. Calculate the standard deviation of their heights. Example 5. In a class of 50 students, 4 students were selected at random, and their total marks in the final assessments are recorded, which are 812, 836, 982, 769. Find the standard deviation of their marks. If you have any doubts regarding this topic, please comment down below. I will respond as per my best. Signing out.